The call came late at night. A worried father answered his phone and heard his son's voice on the other end. The young man sounded calm. Maybe a little frustrated, but not afraid. He explained that his car had gone into a ditch somewhere along a rural road. He wasn't injured. He just needed help finding his way home. The father asked where he was. The son wasn't entirely sure. He believed he could see the lights of a nearby town in the distance. He said he would start walking while staying on the phone. For nearly an hour, father and son talked in the darkness. They discussed landmarks, roads, fields, ditches. The father kept trying to locate him. The son kept moving forward. Then, without warning, everything changed. The young man suddenly shouted two words. "Oh, shit!" The line went silent. His father waited for another sound, nothing. He called his son's name again and again. No answer. The connection remained open, but the voice on the other end had disappeared. That was the last time anyone ever heard from Brandon Swanson, And despite one of the largest searches in Minnesota history, nobody has ever discovered exactly what happened to him. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because every week we uncover real mysteries, unexplained disappearances, and true crime cases that continue to puzzle investigators around the world. Brandon Swanson was a typical American teenager with his entire future ahead of him. At 19 years old, he was finishing his first year of college at Minnesota West Community and Technical College. Friends described him as responsible, intelligent, and dependable. He wasn't known for disappearing. He wasn't known for causing problems. And he certainly wasn't the type of person who would voluntarily vanish. On the evening of May 13, 2008, Brandon attended a small gathering with friends to celebrate the end of the college year. The night was relaxed. Nothing unusual happened. No arguments. No threats. No signs that anything extraordinary was about to occur. As midnight approached, Brandon decided it was time to head home. His destination was Marshall, Minnesota, a drive he had completed many times before. The roads were familiar. The weather was calm. Everything seemed normal. But sometime after midnight, something went wrong. While driving along rural gravel roads, Brandon accidentally guided his vehicle into a ditch. The crash was minor. His car wasn't severely damaged. Most importantly, he wasn't injured. At least, that's what he believed. Unable to free the vehicle, Brandon called his parents. His mother answered first. Soon, both parents became involved in trying to help him. Brandon explained that he thought he knew where he was. He believed he was near the town of Lind. If that was true, finding him should have been relatively easy. His father immediately got into his vehicle and started driving toward the area. Meanwhile, Brandon exited his car and began walking. At first glance, that decision seemed strange. Why leave the vehicle? Why not wait? But Brandon believed he could see the lights of Lind in the distance. The town appeared close. He thought he could simply walk toward it while remaining on the phone. His father agreed to meet him. The plan seemed reasonable. Yet hidden within that decision was a critical problem. Brandon wasn't actually near Lind. Not even close. Unknown to him, he had become disoriented. The lights he believed belonged to Lind were something else entirely. And because he misunderstood his location, every step he took moved him deeper into uncertainty. For the next 47 minutes, Brandon remained on the phone with his father. That phone call would later become one of the most analyzed conversations in missing person history. As Brandon walked through the darkness, he described his surroundings. He crossed gravel roads. Past fields, climbed over fences, navigated uneven terrain. His father repeatedly attempted to locate him based on those descriptions. But something never seemed to match. Whenever Brandon believed he had reached a certain road, his father couldn't find him. Whenever Brandon described a landmark, it didn't fit the expected location. The two men were essentially operating from different maps. Brandon thought he was in one place. Reality placed him somewhere entirely different. Hours later, investigators would discover that he had actually crashed near Taunton, Minnesota. That location was several miles away from where he believed he was. Those miles would become critically important. As the conversation continued, Brandon sounded relatively calm. There were no signs of panic, no indications that someone was following him, no evidence that he felt threatened. In fact, many details suggested he expected to be home soon. That confidence makes the ending even more unsettling, because whatever happened occurred suddenly. Without warning, without explanation. While walking, Brandon occasionally joked with his father. The conversation felt ordinary. That ordinary feeling is precisely what makes the story so haunting. If he had sounded terrified, investigators might have identified a threat. If he had reported danger, authorities would have known where to focus. Instead, the call sounded normal until the final seconds. As Brandon moved through the darkness, he eventually approached a waterway. Investigators believe he may have crossed small streams or drainage channels during his walk. The landscape consisted largely of farmland. Fields stretched across the countryside. Roads were sparse. Visibility was poor. A person unfamiliar with the exact area could easily become confused. Yet Brandon continued moving. His father continued searching. Both believed they would meet shortly. Then came the moment that would define the entire mystery. Without any build-up, Brandon suddenly exclaimed, "Oh, shit!" The words were loud enough to catch his father's attention immediately. Something unexpected had happened, something significant enough to interrupt the conversation. And then silence. No scream, no struggle, no further explanation. Just silence. His father shouted his name, again and again. Nothing. The line remained connected. That detail remains one of the strangest aspects of the case. The phone did not disconnect immediately. It stayed active. But Brandon never spoke another word. His father listened desperately, hoping to hear movement. Breathing, anything. Instead, there was only silence. Eventually, the connection ended. Brandon never answered another call. His parents immediately realized something was terribly wrong. Throughout the night, they searched roads and fields. They drove through rural areas attempting to locate him. Morning arrived. Still no sign of Brandon. At that point, authorities became involved. A massive search operation began. Law enforcement officers, volunteers, search dogs, helicopters. Everyone focused on finding the missing teenager. Initially, investigators believed locating him would be straightforward. After all, they knew approximately where he had been. They possessed details from the phone conversation. They even had his abandoned vehicle. But as the search expanded, an unsettling reality emerged. Brandon appeared to have vanished completely. His car was eventually discovered in a ditch near Taunton. The location immediately revealed a major problem. Brandon had been wrong about where he was. Very wrong. The discovery explained why his father couldn't find him during the phone call. Both men had unknowingly been searching different areas. The realization changed the investigation dramatically. Detectives now needed to determine where Brandon had walked after leaving the vehicle. Search teams examined surrounding farmland. They followed potential routes. They studied terrain maps. Experts attempted to reconstruct his movements. At first, there was optimism. Surely evidence would be found. Footprints, clothing, personal belongings, something. Instead, investigators encountered a mystery that only grew stranger with time. Search dogs were deployed. Their reactions generated both hope and confusion. Me. Several scent trails suggested Brandon had indeed walked through certain areas. The trails appeared consistent with portions of his conversation. For a moment, investigators felt they were making progress. Then the trail ended, abruptly, without explanation. One dog reportedly followed Brandon's scent to a gravel road before losing it completely. That development created new questions. Had Brandon entered a vehicle? Had environmental conditions affected the scent? Or had something else occurred? No one could say with certainty. Days passed, then weeks. Search teams covered enormous sections of countryside. Fields were examined repeatedly. Waterways were checked. Farm buildings were searched. Nothing. No body. No phone. No backpack. No physical evidence capable of explaining the disappearance. For investigators, the absence of evidence became evidence itself. People do not simply evaporate, especially in open farmland. Yet Brandon seemed to have done exactly that. As news of the case spread, public fascination increased. Media outlets covered the story extensively. People became captivated by the mystery of the final phone call. The last words, the silence, the disappearance, everything about the case felt unsettling. Listeners imagined themselves in Brandon's position, alone, walking through darkness, talking to a loved one, then encountering something unexpected. What exactly caused him to say those final words? That question would dominate discussions for years. Some believed he accidentally fell. Others suspected foul play. A few proposed more unusual explanations. But regardless of theory, everyone returned to the same problem. No evidence supported any conclusion. And without evidence, certainty remained impossible. The investigation continued expanding. Authorities refused to give up. Search areas grew larger. New technologies were introduced. Experts reviewed the timeline repeatedly. Every detail mattered. Every minute of the phone call was scrutinized. Some investigators focused on environmental hazards. The region contained streams, rivers, culverts, and difficult terrain. Could Brandon have suffered a fatal accident? Could his remains have gone unnoticed despite extensive searches? The possibility could not be dismissed. Yet many people found that explanation difficult to accept. Search operations had been thorough. Exceptionally thorough. How could such a large effort fail to locate even a trace? The question lingered. And as the months passed, the mystery only deepened. Because soon investigators would discover details about Brandon's route that raised even more troubling possibilities. As investigators continued examining the case, they became increasingly convinced that understanding Brandon's route was the key to solving the mystery. If they could determine exactly where he walked after leaving his vehicle, they might finally discover what happened after those final words. Using information from the phone call, search teams reconstructed a likely path. The evidence suggested Brandon had moved eastward through farmland. He crossed roads, walked through fields, climbed fences, and at some point, he entered an area containing a small creek. That discovery immediately attracted attention. Could Brandon have fallen into the water? Could the phrase, "Oh, shit," have been a reaction to losing his footing? It seemed plausible. Investigators searched waterways extensively. Creeks were examined. Drainage ditches were inspected. Nearby rivers were checked. But once again, nothing was found. No trace of Brandon appeared. The lack of evidence frustrated everyone involved. Families often find comfort when a search uncovers answers. Even tragic answers provide closure. The Swanson family received neither. Instead, they faced the most difficult possibility of all: not knowing. As months passed, volunteers continued searching. Many people in Minnesota became deeply invested in the case. Strangers dedicated weekends to looking through fields and wooded areas. Search parties returned repeatedly to locations that had already been examined. Everyone hoped a missed clue would finally emerge. Unfortunately, each search ended the same way. No answers. The mystery grew larger. Public interest expanded beyond Minnesota. Online communities began discussing the disappearance. Forums analyzed maps. People reviewed timelines. Amateur investigators attempted to solve the case. One detail continued drawing attention: the phone itself. In most missing person cases, mobile phones become important sources of evidence. Calls, messages, location data. But in 2008, cell phone technology was not as advanced as it is today. The available information could only provide a general picture. Investigators knew Brandon had been communicating with his father. They knew approximately where the signal originated, but they could not track his movements with modern GPS precision. That limitation would haunt the investigation. Many people wondered whether today's technology might have prevented the mystery altogether. If Brandon disappeared altogether, perhaps authorities could have pinpointed his exact location within minutes. But in 2008, that capability did not exist. The investigation had to rely on traditional methods, and traditional methods were producing few results. As the first year passed, detectives examined another possibility. What if Brandon encountered another person after the phone call ended? The theory could not be dismissed. Rural roads occasionally attract traffic, even during late hours. Farmers, travelers, local residents. Perhaps someone saw him. Perhaps someone offered assistance. Perhaps someone had information they never realized was important. Investigators appealed to the public repeatedly. Any information, no matter how small, could matter. Yet no witness came forward with a credible account explaining Brandon's fate. The silence remained, and with each passing year, that silence became more troubling. Then attention shifted toward foul play. Whenever a missing person case remains unsolved for long periods, investigators must consider criminal involvement. Could someone have harmed Brandon? Could his final words have been directed toward another individual? The theory generated discussion, but evidence remained scarce. There were no signs of a struggle, no reports of suspicious vehicles, no confirmed witnesses placing another person near Brandon during his walk. Without supporting evidence, detectives struggled to build a convincing criminal scenario. Still, they could not eliminate the possibility. The mystery existed precisely because no explanation fit perfectly. Every theory solved one problem while creating another. Accident, foul play, exposure, abduction. Each possibility contained weaknesses. Each possibility left important questions unanswered. Years continued passing. The Swanson family never stopped searching. While public attention gradually shifted elsewhere, they remained committed to finding answers. Interviews were given. Awareness campaigns continued. Searches resumed whenever new information emerged. Their determination inspired many people, but determination alone could not solve the mystery. What they needed was evidence. And evidence remained elusive. One particularly important development occurred when investigators refined their understanding of Brandon's likely route. Experts concluded that he probably crossed a creek shortly before the phone call ended. The terrain in that area was difficult. Steep banks, thick vegetation, uneven ground. It was easy to imagine someone stumbling unexpectedly. For many observers, this became the most convincing explanation. Brandon may have encountered a sudden drop, a hidden obstacle. A dangerous section of terrain. His final words could have been a reaction to that discovery. Yet even if that theory was correct, a major problem remained. Search teams had examined the area extensively. Why hadn't they found him? That question prevented the theory from becoming a complete answer. Investigators also explored the possibility that environmental conditions affected the search. The region contained dense vegetation during parts of the year. Water movement could alter landscapes. Animals could disturb evidence. Nature has a remarkable ability to conceal things. Many experienced search professionals acknowledged that remains have occasionally been overlooked in difficult environments. The possibility was uncomfortable but realistic. Perhaps Brandon had been much closer than anyone realized. Perhaps the answer existed within an area already searched. Without proof, nobody could know. As technology improved over the years, authorities revisited the case. New mapping techniques were applied. Additional searches were organized. Experts reviewed old evidence through fresh perspectives. Every advancement created hope. Maybe this time something would be discovered. Maybe this time the mystery would finally end. Yet the outcome never changed. No sign of Brandon emerged. The disappearance entered the category investigators fear most: a long-term cold case. Cold cases possess a unique kind of sadness. The urgency fades. Witness memories weaken. Physical evidence deteriorates. And yet the questions remain exactly as powerful as they were on the first day. For the Swanson family, time did not reduce the mystery. If anything, it made the absence harder to understand. Birthdays passed. Holidays came and went. Years turned into more than a decade. Still, there was no explanation. The story became one of America's most haunting modern disappearances. Not because it involved a serial killer. Not because it featured dramatic clues, but because it felt so ordinary. A young man called his parents for help. A father tried to guide his son home. And then the son vanished. The simplicity of the story made it deeply unsettling. Anyone could imagine themselves in that situation. Anyone could imagine making that phone call. Anyone could imagine hearing those final words. That relatability transformed the case into something unforgettable. Even today, investigators remain open to new information. The case has never been closed. Authorities continue encouraging witnesses to come forward. A single detail could change everything. One observation, one memory, one overlooked clue. History has shown that cold cases can be solved after decades. Sometimes the smallest piece of information unlocks the entire puzzle. Until then, Brandon's disappearance remains suspended between theories. Some believe he suffered a tragic accident. Others suspect foul play. A few remain convinced that the truth lies in an explanation nobody has considered yet. What makes the mystery so enduring is that every possibility feels incomplete. The accident theory explains the final words, but not the absence of evidence. The foul play theory explains the disappearance, but lacks supporting proof. Every road seems to lead to another question, and perhaps that is why the story continues capturing attention. Human beings naturally seek conclusions. We want beginnings, middles, and endings. The Brandon Swanson case offers only the beginning and the middle. The ending remains missing. Somewhere in rural Minnesota, the answer exists. Whether hidden within the landscape, buried in forgotten memories, or known only to circumstances that can no longer speak, the truth remains out there. The challenge is finding it. On that spring night in May 2008, a 19-year-old college student expected to be home within a short time. He called his parents. He described what he believed he could see. He walked toward distant lights, and for nearly an hour, everything seemed manageable. Then came two words that would become famous throughout the true crime world. Two words that marked the final known moment of Brandon Swanson's life. Oh, shit. What he saw, what he encountered, what happened next, no one knows. His father never heard another sound. His mother never received another call. Investigators never found a definitive answer. And more than a decade later, one of America's most chilling mysteries continues to ask the same question. What happened to Brandon Swanson? Until that question is answered, the case remains a haunting reminder that sometimes people can disappear in the most ordinary circumstances imaginable. A quiet road, a simple phone call, a short walk home, and then nothing, just silence. Endless, unexplained silence. For the Swanson family, that silence has lasted years. For investigators, it remains one of Minnesota's most frustrating mysteries. And for everyone who hears the story, it serves as a chilling reminder that even the most routine night can suddenly become a mystery that lasts a lifetime. Somewhere beyond those dark fields and empty roads lies the truth. Whether it will ever be discovered remains one of the great, unanswered questions of modern true crime.